Hey guys, Kathy Iconis here, ready to get started on our next lesson. Our next lesson. So we're going to be talking about customizing QBO with company settings, right? And we're going to go into the company settings area and really dive in deeper into all of these areas where they really impact how the QBO file actually operates and is set up, and different forms and fields that you have, and all these different options that really are customizing QuickBooks to help your client. So you want to find the best fit for your client on all of these different options. And it's usually a place where you'll go when you have an issue of you want something working a certain way. We're probably going to end up in company settings to deal with that, right? Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is the main company settings page right here. So what I'm going to do is dive in to QBO, right? And I'm going to come up to that gear icon over here and go to account and settings. And this is what I'm talking about, the main company settings. It's this first page here. When we are in here, you can come in and select edit and look at all of these different options. You're going to have several places within QBO where you can have more than one contact information. So in here, we can have a different legal name versus the actual company name that people see, right? Next, I'm going to get that problem a lot, right? Next, we're going to look at the tax form. And this is important if you are a nonprofit. You definitely want to select this option here because it changes the layout or the terminology on your balance sheet to show like net assets and give you different options when you're setting up different chart of accounts that way. For everything else is pretty much the same in here. Where you really want to pay attention to this, if you're worried about these different forms, I mean, it's okay not to have anything in here. But if the client is using a tax preparer that uses ProConnect Tax Online, then this will become more important because that actually integrates seamlessly between QBO and into ProConnect and or ProConnect Tax Online. So let me show you this little briefcase. When we come here, ProConnect Tax Online, this pushes everything from this QBO subscription into a tax return. And so what you're really doing is trying to help pre-fill all of the fields on the tax return by getting the right mapping together. We'll talk about chart of accounts more later, but know that this is where you're going to change that that form there, okay? Then coming down to contact info, this, as you can see, your company email, you have a different one for your client-facing email. So where's QuickBooks going to contact you versus how your clients are going to see you, and those show up on sales forms that way. And whatever you fill out here is going to also help auto-fill what is on your sales form. So when you go and look at customizing that, which we'll do in a second. The company address and the client-facing address and legal address right there, right? Then if you have the situation where you have a lot of different divisions and a lot of different addresses, you're going to need to utilize locations, okay? And we'll have that, and we'll see that in a second. But the reason I'm showing that to you is that we come into our locations area. All I did was I go to all lists, right? Come down here to locations. I can see my location that I have created. I can edit this, and this is where I have an additional address. Different name, different address, okay? So if you have a lot of those that you're dealing with and you need to have on the sales forms, then this is how we set that up. So you're not limited to just what is shown in this main company settings area for this contact information. Marketing preferences is really what kind of emails and stuff like that you get from QBO. Okay. Now, usage is basically, we talked about before the different levels of QBO, and we're paying attention here as to if we need to be bumped up to advanced. And you can see what the limits are on the accounts and how far away we are from having to go up and upgrade into advanced right here. So we have this, it takes us directly to the areas to manage them. I click on accounts, we're going to see the chart of accounts right here. So that helps you, quick link to get there. But most importantly, this is all about managing your QBO file to see if you really need to go to advanced. Or I presume that it's going to upgrade you. So if you're on Simple Start or Essentials, it's going to show you what goes next, right? Okay. So next, this is where we start diving into the really big stuff, right? So we're going to first look at customize the look and feel of our forms. So we can do this here, but there's also the other option of I can come in here and come to customize form and settings. It's the same, it's going to get me the same place, okay? So you have the option to have a ton of different forms and styles, forms and styles on here to utilize for your customers. You can also, if I go into new style and import a style, I can import this from a Word document. It gives me instructions and samples on how to do that. So that might be something you need to look at if you're looking for a lot more flexibility than what we have in QBO. But I have to say, we have a pretty good amount of flexibility in here. So running down here, we're going to, you can change up the format. They have a whole bunch of different options available to you. Make logo edits in here, try other colors. Let's see. All of this wonderful stuff in here, right? Now, let's get into a little bit more invoice related stuff that we're going to be paying attention to. So if I click on this, edit, I can get rid of the business name. I can change this sort of stuff and say what I want, what information do I want included in there? Do I want to name the invoice an invoice, or do I want to have a different name? Do I want to use custom transaction numbers in here? And do I want to put in custom fields? We have that option here as well. So all of this on the top part. Then on the second part here, we can move around our columns. Realize that this moves things up. Okay. There we go. We moved it. We can edit the lengths, the widths of things, show more activity options. We can group activity by day, week, month, and type. Type is if you have a billable expense versus a time entry or something like that. It can group that for you. You can collapse activity rows, so things that are the same rate and description, they would group together. Then we have these other options on here if you want them or not. We have a lot of flexibility as to what shows up in these different areas and moving them around and, all of that fun jazz. I'm going to move that description down because it'll bug me if it's not there. But, look at this. It's, do I really want that to be that amount? Or let's see, if I make that there, product description. Oh, here we go. Then I can move that around. I got to get the amount. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, so there's plenty of stuff that you can play around with in here to make things fun for you. Okay, now coming down to this bottom area of display, we show the discount, the deposit, estimate, summary. If it's related to the estimate itself, what messages do you have to your customers, and that sort of thing, okay? Next, let's look at emailing options on here. It shows you a preview of what the email will look like when you send this out to them. And so do you want to attach a PDF to that email? I actually recommend doing that. I think in some of QuickBooks material they say don't, because basically they want you to be working with the invoice within their system to do the e-invoice. So when you send it to a client, they're going to get this, right? This look, and then they have to click on that, and it opens up an e-invoice where they can download the PDF or something from there. If we are dealing with our clients' customers are more sophisticated and have more of an AP system and that sort of thing, they don't want to go through all those clicks. So remind our clients that they want to make it stupid easy to get paid. And so sometimes it's important to include that PDF on things. And I like to do that versus having to make my customer go somewhere, click something to save it and deal with it that way. Now, there could be other business reasons to not have the PDF on there. It's just a matter of, that's an example of why I include it on things. Okay, so looking at the standard email on things, we can have a reminder email. This is all pre-filling out the information that would go to the client or the end customer. So, it's helpful. It's nice, all these different options we have in here. One thing I have noticed of late is that, and I just said that, I don't know if that makes me sound older or something. Who knows? So when I have account summary on here and show on invoice, what the account summary right here does is it shows you the previous balance and then the new charges and the total amount due. In this situation, look that the total amount due is $715, but this, which is different from the tax area, but I think that's a template, right? That it's not going to be exact. But the $715 is not this current invoice, the amount on this invoice. It's the amount, like the total balance on the account that they, everything that they owe our client is $715. Now, when I email this out, it's going to give you the entire amount that's showing up as due on the invoice. So if you include that account summary, it's going to show you that. And this is driving me crazy that these options do not tie. I'm trying to explain to you, but I've seen it where, this total amount due, that $715, shows up on the email. So just an example, I have a client where I do all the invoicing for them, and they have some customers that do not pay timely. So we might have 4 or 5 invoices that are open. And to help with collections of things, I will have this account summary listed on here, right? And when the invoice goes out, so I know that the current invoice is for $665 in that situation, but they really owe us $715. When the invoice goes out, the email that goes out to them says, now pay the $715 right here. In some situations, we don't want to do that. So be aware that if you do have that account summary, it does impact the email and the amount that goes out to the end customer. So you want to pay attention to that. Now, payments, this is where we would set up payments. We have the other option, another area to set this up, so do that. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, what I will tell you is when with payments and sending out an invoice, we always have the option to select to give our end customer what kind of payment forms we select. So even if you are signed up for payments, you don't have to turn on accepting payments for all of the customers. Okay, you can do it for some of them, all of that. And then these in here, you can preview these. Oop, I'm gonna save and exit. And then you can make a make a different one the default. Whenever you are in an invoice itself, you can go into customize and you can change the style, or you can come in and edit the style as we're in it. But those are different options to get to the same place pretty much and do this. So coming back over to accountant settings, we're going into the sales area. So we've looked at customizing the look and feel of things, right? So now let's look at the actual information that's on these sales forms. So one thing to note in a lot of these places that we have this little question mark right here, and the question mark gives us a little bit better understanding of what we're looking at. So preferred invoice terms, set the default to net 30 means this. Remember, they're also setting this all up to help just regular business owners understand what all of the, what all these options are. So that's why we have some of these notes in here as well. So anything we set up in here is going to be a default when we create the sales form. So by default, do we want it on due on receipt? By default, do we want it net 30? But we still have the option to change it when we are in the invoice itself. Preferred delivery method. Do you want to have the little checkbox to send later or print later? Do you want that always done? Do we want to do shipping? Now, custom fields right here, this is an area where we add additional fields onto our sales forms. And maybe you need to have a purchase order field or something like that. The thing about these fields is they are searchable within reports, but if you're trying to group things together, the fields don't have a drop down. So the information has to be entered completely the same every single time for it to show up on any search of a report. So understand that option right there. And remember, we talked about advanced before, where advanced has different types of fields we can put on here. This is just a very static, we can enter in text on there. And then do we want to have it to be just internal, or do we want it to also show up on the form itself? So I could uncheck that. You can't uncheck the internal, right? But you can do that. One thing to know too is that if you have custom fields on your invoice, if you do not utilize it, it will not show up on the invoice. So if I had this, say, purchase order, and had that on there, then when I go into the invoice and I don't put anything in purchase order, it doesn't show up on my invoice, so it doesn't look blank, if you're worried about that. But if I do have a PO in there, it will show up and it'll have the heading of, purchase order, whatever I write in my name of my custom field. Now, going on, custom transaction numbers lets you change whatever the transaction numbers on the invoice. So what QBO does is that it goes chronologically on invoices, invoice numbers or sales forms and all of that. What you can do when you turn this on, you can just set up whatever you want, enter anything you want in there. If you have a specific type of invoicing, like numbering system, like maybe you have letters before it or something like that, you can actually come in here. So let me turn this on, do save, done, right? I'm going to come into an invoice here. It now shows me the invoice number, and I see this example of XY-1319. So I put this in here, right? And let me go ahead and create an invoice so that I have an example, right? And save and close. Okay. If I come back to accountant settings, sales, and turn this off, done, I'm going to go to my invoice. Okay, and I'm going to create a new invoice. And do a save. Now, it has kept the additional or the beginning information right here, and it just updated it chronologically to the next number. So before it was 1319, now it's 1320, right? So you can come in, customize it, then get out of that, turn the customization off, because as you can see, I don't have this option anymore to change the numbers. And then we have this setup, this format, that's the word, the format going this way, going forward. So that would be, I don't know, that might be a good feature for you in some situation. So this is how you would do that. Okay, coming back over to sales, and this is the big one, guys. Like this course is, we're going through all of this stuff. It's very important to understand all of these things as to how they are going to impact your file or your subscription, turning all this stuff on and what does it do on things. Okay, so service date, do I want to have a service date field where I track these things on here? It works well with like time. But if you have maybe like situations where you have a client that they go out and work on someone's house on a certain day, you want to include that as a field. It creates that as now this is going to be a date field on the invoice, okay? Discount here, when we set up a discount, we want to see here where it's going. So it's going to advanced chart of accounts, discount account. It only goes to that one account on things, right? These I almost call like pseudo custom fields because we can either have them or not have them on the invoice itself. Same thing with deposits. It adds a deposit field to invoices. And then tips actually shows up on sales receipts. And they always go to undistributed tips account. So let's look at these options. I'm going to escape out of here. Or not. Okay. So coming back to invoice here, right? Let's look at all of these options. I have to bring up a previous one. So I can have my deposit right here, right? And once I enter in that deposit, then up here, it brings in the area of where do I put that deposit. So it kind of makes that like a deposit screen all of a sudden. So a second ago, I did not have that area. As soon as I fill that in, now I have this payment method, reference number, and everything. So I could put in that deposit. Now, discount is this area right here versus being one of the lines. I personally prefer it being a line item where I just put in discount and do that. So I have a little bit more control as to how this shows up on the financials and everything. But if you want to use discount, you can have that here. You can do a percent, a value. You can flip it as to does the discount happen before sales tax is applied or after it, all of that. There's different reasonings and needs for different ways. We can put in the shipping cost. I feel bad saying, oh my God, I'm still doing it. Feel bad doing $500. Let's do $595. That's what we usually see, right? So we have that in there, and all of that is laid out. So these are where those fields, those, what I said, pseudo custom fields show up on here. And we have that kind of setup. No, I do not want to save this invoice. And do you want to leave without saving? I just want to cancel. Ay. Okay. Sales receipt. So if I come over to a sales receipt, a prior one, let me just pull this up. Excuse me. See, now we have the discount field, we have the shipping field. Well, this is where you see tip. Like I said before, we're only going to see tips on sales receipts because think about this in a restaurant situation or in a situation where we would get a tip. It happens, we would have the sale and the payment at the same time, which is a sales receipt. When that happens, we utilize a sales receipt. So then they would say, here's the additional amount, here's your tip on things, okay? And then we enter in that information. It goes to undistributed tips. You have to manage it separately from there. There's no feature within QBO that really deals with that. So you're going to have to figure out a way to make that all work on the tip side. You're going to have to distribute the tips somehow and record that. But this is where tips shows up. Now, coming back over to account and settings. Okay, so we went through that. The next is products and services. So do we want to show product service column on the sales form? Do we want to have a SKU on things? Which, you know, some businesses need to have that, right? Do we want to utilize price rules? Here, this is where we turn this on. Now, stay tuned for our sales lesson. Well, I'll definitely go into price rules there, okay? Do we want to track quantity and price per rate? That's one thing. And then, so it's like, do you want to track the quantity on things? And then the next level above that is, do you want to track inventory quantity on hand on things? So you could just, in this instance, just track quantity and price and not have inventory set up on this client if you want to do that. Again, this is just adding options to the lines on your sales forms, having that as part of this database that we're managing called QuickBooks. Okay, then progress invoicing. Again, we're going to talk about that in the sales area, but this is where the sales lesson, sorry. This is where we turn on progress invoicing itself. Messages, these are the same as when we were looking at the custom styles. This is pretty much the same stuff. We have, I think this might be new, of putting in the copy, email, and stuff. New as in it wasn't in that other area of customizing invoices, that we have more options of doing the emails and stuff in here. Customize your reminders. Online delivery, same thing. Do you want to attach that PDF to things? How do you want to send out those invoices? You have a ton of different options here. Statements, list each transaction as a single line. Do we want to show an aging? All of that on all these different options within sales itself, okay? So now let's move on to expenses in here. So again, remember our little question mark is going to explain everything for us. If we look at this, show items table on expenses and purchase forms. So now when we set up products and services within QBO, those are the things that show up on our sales forms, the invoices and the sales receipts. Now, this gives us the option, do we want to show those products and services on our expense forms? We've changed the terminology on us to confuse us a little bit. So they're calling them items now, right? It's still products and services. So when I come back over here and I go to an expense form itself, I'll have the regular area of the category, which this books it directly to the chart of account. So those are my options, my chart of accounts here. This is where the item is the product service. So that option is either, do I want to have this whole area from like this items area on my expense forms, or do I not? And a reason to do that is then I can run reports off of these product service items, and I could see the revenue and the expenses related to those if I wanted to. So know that is why that would be utilized. So, okay. This is where we turn on tracking expenses and items by client. Funny thing is, I always get confused about this because I'm like, for some reason, I'm like, I think it should be in the sales area, but it makes total sense to be in the expense area, right? Because we want to code those expenses to clients, but for some reason, when I go searching for it, I always go to sales first. Whatever, right? Crazy Kathy. There you go. Make expenses and items billable right there to turn that on. Do you want to have a default markup rate on this? And even have the markup option. Like I can just turn off markup and that won't show up as a field on my my forms, or I can put this on and have a default. Do I want to track billable expenses and items as income? And this is important is that something that's going to show up should be on as revenue on our financials? So if that does happen, how do I want that to show up on the financials? In a single account or in multiple accounts? When I have multiple accounts, I have more control as to where it goes. If it is just a single account, I believe the default usually goes to billable expense income as your line item on your P&L. So know that that's how that works. I prefer to do this. Then when we are in the chart of accounts itself, let me show you that. So what I have to do is I go into the chart of accounts and I have to go to like an expense right here, and I would go in and edit that. I could use this for billable expenses. So if I have a billable expense of rent, when that happens and then I turn it over onto an invoice, and I know this is a weird conversation. We will talk more about this in our sales lesson, but when that goes onto an invoice, where do I want that revenue to show up, right? Because I'm sending this out to get paid by a client. So do I want that consulting revenue where I have this option right here? So this is where I'm talking about I have more control versus just one revenue account on things. So, but coming back over to accountant settings, and when I say it fast enough, doesn't it sound like accountant settings? Or it's just my little bit of southernness that comes out. I don't know. So here we have, do we want to charge sales tax on things? Turn that on, and then we have the option to set up sales tax and go through that whole module there. Default payment terms. This is something funky that happened on me making this whole test company, so ignore that. But do you want it to be like net 30? Do you all that sort of, those different things. Now, guys, I'm like, I reached my limit on talking about that, I guess. I don't know. Getting a little punchy over here. But going on, we got this. I can do this for you guys, right? You're having a fun time. Hopefully you're laughing a little bit at me and we're getting through it. So now purchase orders. Do we want to utilize that? That makes it as like even a form that we can use within QBO. Then we have those custom fields. Do we want on the PO itself? Custom transaction numbers, all of that fun stuff. And then messages on when we send out purchase orders to those vendors. Where do we want to send that all to? And you can email me a copy, blah, 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 all those different fun options. Okay. So coming back over to my PowerPoint, and just know that the PowerPoint, I have most of these screenshots in here for you guys to look at stuff and you can review it later. We're going through all of that. But payments, I can't show you the live one because it's a test company and I don't have payments set up, right? So here is payments in basically my account with everything like grayed out on things. So let's look at this because I want to show you this. So when we set up a payments account, we're going to have all of this information in here. Right now in my sample company, it is just giving me the option to like basically set up payments. So, and go through that application process. But once it is set up, this is where we get into all of these things. So we have merchant details. It's important to know what your merchant ID is, because if it gets like disconnected or something, the merchant ID, reconnect it and make everything nice and happy in your QBO file. You can click on this to manage the account. Let me go right here. If you did click on this, it goes to a separate website altogether, right? And it looks like this. It's, it's a little old school. The older, I'm like pre-Harmony days. I'm not even sure if you guys know the Harmony days versus the pre. We're in the look and feel of QBO now is called Harmony. Back in the day when everybody hated QuickBooks Online, it looked more like this. So I feel like Harmony try to make people like QBO even more, So, but yes, and there was a time when people hated QuickBooks Online. I have been around for that. I've been through the transition of that. But so here's the payment settings. When we go in, this is the merchant information. We can go into the detail as to activity reports, processing tools, all of this sort of stuff. You can request a reader, all of that. But coming back over here, right? We have all this. So it's telling you can run deposit reports and see transaction details. So if you have a thing where your payments, you don't know what makes up the payments that are coming into your bank feed, you can go in here, manage the account, and go see what transactions are related to what deposit on things, okay? You'll see your deposit speed. So credit cards, how fast do those get in? Bank transfers, how fast do those get in? You can upgrade here. I think it's an additional fee if you want to upgrade that. Deposit accounts, this is basically just setting it up. Which account in your chart of accounts is that going to? Okay, business owner info would be that. Documents, here are actual statements of our merchant accounts, everything that's going on in them. And so you can get those there. Okay, I was wrong, guys. This is the grayed out area. The deposit account is actually linking. It shows you the actual, what the account number is that you're depositing into. This is the chart of accounts right here. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Okay, so standard deposits and processing fees. Where do you want those to go? That's where you set that up. Because what happens is when you set up payments, QBO does all of the accounting for you on things where it will create, will automatically create the payment on an invoice, or when it's a sales receipt, it automatically, there's nothing really to create. But then it will also create the deposit into your bank that matches the bank feed, and then also will record any of your processing fees, your merchant fees on that. Okay, so those are all of those options in here. And that's what it looks like. I always tell people to go to payments.intuit.com to get to this. I believe the website might have changed a little bit, but you still can go to payments.intuit.com. It's the legacy link. Or when you're in QBO, go to account and settings and go to manage account. And that's how you get there. Okay, here's the big mamma jamma. Holy, guys, advanced settings, right? So we're going to go through here, all of these. So I'm trying to think of the best way to start talking about it. So what I have on this side, all the bolded things I'm going to talk about now, and then categories and automation, they have more options, and they're on these following slides for when you look at them, because they are important to deal with, right? But let's go into QBO and go through all of this together. So that's how the slides are laid out, but let's just flow through this all together here. Okay, accounting. this fiscal year. Do you want your fiscal year to be different? First month of your income tax year, same as the fiscal year. And your accounting method, cash versus accrual. This is where you can set that up here. This is the way that different apps, if you are connected to them, will see as your accounting method. It's the default for how reports are created or reported within QBO. Now, within every report, or almost every report, you have the option to change it between cash and accrual. Okay? So even if you have cash here, it's okay. You can still run an accrual-based report within QBO. Okay, it's not all or nothing in this case. This is just the default for the business. And then if you are connected to any other app, that's how that app will see the business. So if you're going for reporting or something like that, it's going to know that it's just cash basis on things if that app connects to QBO. Okay, here, closing the books. When we set a closing, when we close the books, basically we have the option to kind of stop people from making changes to prior periods, right? So we'd have a closing date as of today or last year, whatever it is. And what happens is we either have the option to create a warning and say, hey, you really don't want to change this. It's a prior period. We don't want to make those changes. Or do we want to have a warning and they have to enter a password to even be able to make that change? So we have that here. Okay. This might be good to do yearly or monthly, depending on your client. We don't want prior period changes after a tax return has been filed because it just makes it makes a tax preparer go insane if you start changing numbers off of things that they've already filed with the IRS. So that's why we do these closing the books things, okay? So we have the password. You can create whatever password you want in here. Go through that, right? Okay, tax forms. This is just like in the company area. It's the same field. What tax form do you want? So that's redundant. Then chart of accounts. Do you want to utilize account numbers and do you want to show the account numbers on things? I personally prefer account numbers, but I know there's people out there that don't. It's going to be a preference thing. I will tell you, I prefer account numbers because it will let you organize the chart of accounts in a way that is more, I feel, more meaningful to clients and help with reporting of things. So that's why I use account numbers. But again, here's your options, right? Then shipping account, discount account, tips account. Those sound familiar, right? That was in the sales area, but I didn't have the option as to where the shipping went. And this is, yes. So I can change them now over here into my chart of accounts. Awesome. Billable expense income account. We have this. That doesn't have that drop down because remember we have multiple income accounts set up on here. So we have that. Categories. So here's the thing. This is how we can segment the business. Is we have ways to do this versus classes versus locations. So classes is the most commonly used one, and it shows up more often as options when you're connected to third-party apps. But classes show up on each row, usually, of a transaction. You can change it to one class for the entire transaction itself. So if I have an invoice and I have 5 lines on that invoice, I can put different classes on all of those. If I have an expense or a bill with 5 line items, I can put different classes on all of those, right? Or if I change this, it would just be one class for that whole transaction. Now, locations, you only have the option to have one per the entire transaction, okay? So that's a difference there. It's just a different way to segment the books. Classes, when we set those up, they're always called classes. Location, it's just, or track locations, yeah. Location, we can, basically it's changing the header of what that field is. So it's a business. It's called business now, and we have a business list and stuff, but we still create our own items within it. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, we have track locations and track classes that way. Turn them on, turn them off on things. Sometimes I have run into issues where I had locations on things, I turned them off, and then that impacted my my usage within going back up to the next level or something of the system, the subscription. So you would have to come back in here, turn it back on. Like, it doesn't go away. It just doesn't show up on any of your reporting of things, or when you're looking at transactions. It just doesn't happen. So know that. Now, automation. Automation is amazing and great, but you want to be very, very careful as to what you want QuickBooks to do for you, because you want to remember that we utilize QuickBooks to help us save time. If we're using automation and it makes more of a headache, then that is not good automation anymore, right? So we pre-fill the forms with previously entered content. Yes, that could be awesome. Great. Remember our little question marks, right? Do we want to automatically apply credits? So in that situation, and I love that they give this example of requires security. If you're a property manager, that requires security deposits. It's a random example. But so on the invoices or anything on the sales side of things, just a second. Okay. So on the sales sides of things, we have, when we get paid, you want that payment to be automatically applied to things. So if you get a payment from a customer and it goes to do you want it to automatically apply to 5 different invoices that were open or something like that, right? Do we want that automation or not? I say, and you would get this in my cleanup course, if you were doing a cleanup job, then I wouldn't have these on, but they are very helpful otherwise. If you have a lot of clients that your clients' customers are paying on different invoices and stuff like that, and it's really confusing, you don't want to have this automation on, okay? Do you want to automatically invoice unbilled activity? So automation of actually invoicing unbilled activity. And when I set this up, I would automatically invoice customers on a schedule. It only happens on one time. Well, here I have weekly, daily, yearly, all that, any activity, and it will automatically create those invoices and send them out, or don't notify me, or just remind me to create invoices in there, right? So we have those options. It's when we utilize delayed charges that happens. Automatically apply bill payments in here. This is on the expense side. So if I do a bill and I pay the bill, do I automatically want that to be applied to, close out that bill or whatever open bills I have and that sort of thing? Again, sometimes it's awesome, sometimes it's not. Now, project tracking. Here, once you turn on project tracking, you cannot turn it off. As you see, there is no option to turn that off. And we'll talk about projects more in our sales lesson. Time tracking, we have this set up here. Add service field to timesheets. We can do things, make it billable to a client. But the big thing here is, do you want to show your billing rate to users that are entering time? If you don't want them to see what you're actually getting off of them, then we would turn that off. And when they go in and enter time, they wouldn't see what the billable rate is on things. Then currency, we can turn up, we have multi-currency. Again, this is another one. Once you turn it on, you cannot turn it off. You cannot undo this. But we do have multi-currency within QBO. And then just regular date other preferences, our date format, our number format, how do we want to see things in here. I have never seen 1, 2, well, okay. Customer label, do we want to change it? So do we have donors? Do we have tenants? And all that does is every time you would see client or customer within QBO, it changes the name of it. So I'll show you that in a split second. Warn if a duplicate check number is used or if a duplicate bill number is used, we have that. And this is like if you're inactive in QBO, you know, when do you get signed out? You have that option, okay? So, I'm just going to show you this one thing. So, when I come over to invoices, this is where it says clients on things. And within reporting, I come down to sales and customers. Everything is called client. If I change that to one of those other options, it would change all of it here. So it would be donor contact list. And that's what it does within the system. It changes all of that. So, whew, that was a big, long session. So that is the end of our account and settings course lesson for today.